This is episode 54 of Our Modern Heritage, the new Home and Family Culture podcast. I'm your host, Jody Chafee. In this episode, I got to interview Marissa Levin, CEO of Successful Culture. Marissa Levin, CEO of Successful Culture, a 25-year entrepreneur, speaker, and globally recognized growth strategist. Marissa's lifetime legacy mission is to educate, equip, and empower 100 million entrepreneurs and leaders with the skill set and mindset they need to reach their greatest potential. Marissa Levin's entrepreneurial journey began in 1995 when she launched Information Experts, a strategic communication and education firm. In 2012, she launched Successful Culture, a leadership consulting organization that helps CEOs master the three most critical aspects of business growth: leadership development, strategy formulation and execution, and organizational culture assessment and improvement. In 2017, she co-founded Women's CEO Roundtable, and also in 2017, Marissa merged Successful Culture with People Tactics, a national leader in strategic HR consulting, to launch Successful Culture International, or SCI. She is also a regional chair for Women's Presidents Organization, and Marissa is the author of the #1 best-selling book, Built to Scale: How Top Companies Create Breakthrough Growth Through Exceptional Advisory Boards. And finally, Marissa is a leadership columnist for Inc. magazine. Marissa holds a master's degree in human resources development and organizational development, is a credentialed coach certified by International Coach Federation, is certified in instructional systems design, and is certified mastermind facilitator. Welcome, Marissa. You are very accomplished.
Good to see you.
I'm so thankful for you and honored to have you here on the show to talk about more of your experience and related to the family culture. And I'm just, thank you for being here.
No, thank you for what you're doing. It's so important. So I'm honored to be able to impart some of my wisdom that I've gained over the last 51 years of my life, 25 years of those being in business and 21 of those being a mom. And hopefully your listeners will, get something that they'll be able to apply in their own life.
Awesome. Well, it's so amazing to know, like, you accomplished all these amazing things as a mom, and that's inspiring. That's really encouraging that, we can be so much. We can just live our dreams. And I love that. So I love what you're doing too, that so much of your work with companies is about culture, company culture. And, a lot of what I've been studying, what I've been learning about family culture is that people are very familiar with corporate culture. People will hear like, oh, they might go to seminars or conferences all about corporate culture, how to understand the importance of their corporate culture. But when I say family culture, like, kind of scratching their head, like, what does that mean? And really, it's very similar. I mean, you can really translate a lot of the things that are about corporate culture into your family culture. And really, families are, if you run them that way, it doesn't have to be like this cold, we're corporate culture as a family. No, it is whatever you develop it to be. And that's the power of the family culture. So has that been your experience with translating, what you've learned about corporate culture and what you know about family culture? Has that been your experience?
So, as I mentioned, our kids are 18 and 21, and then my first business is 25 years old. So I've been down both the entrepreneurial journey and the parenting journey now for a long time. And in both circumstances and environments, the single most important thing for both is intention. Okay. So if you want your family to develop a certain way, what are you going to be intentional about?
Yeah.
What we focus on grows, and what we neglect dies. That's just life. So in your family, thinking about the types of people that you want your kids to grow into, how you want to cultivate them, that all starts with us as the parents, the leaders, the CEOs of the family, right? Yeah. And so the way that we behave and the way that we act, the way that we treat other people, the expectations that we have for our children, it's a very similar type of leadership requirement that is also in organizations, right?
Yeah.
So as a CEO, as I wanted to grow my people and I wanted to grow, a certain type of structure in my organization, there were things that I had to do as a leader, very intentional, to make that happen. So, I have always been a very values-centric, values-based individual. I grew up with a very strong set of core values in my own family. Growing up with my own parents, I knew what they expected of me. I knew what they valued. And I kind of carry that over into my adult life, both as a parent and as an organizational leader. So everything that I've kind of always done and been and how I've shown up in my life and everything really does stem from a values standpoint.
Yeah. And like you said, that you have to be intentional about those values. You have to work out what is important to you. What are your standards? What are your values? And because, I've mentioned before, and I've read this in your articles that there is a culture in the corporate or in a family, whether it's by default or by design.
Absolutely.
And when you are not intentional, then you're just kind of coasting. And a lot of times I've related family culture to a vehicle, and it's this analogy of like almost, driving a car. But it's like if you are coasting, then you're sitting in the back of the bus going, where are we going?
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand. And so that's where I relate to family culture, and is that you do have to be ultra intentional. You have to know how to break down what your values are. So values is number one, I think, is an important part of family culture.
Yeah.
And then what are other components of a successful culture?
In a family or in a business?
In general. I mean, I think that because they relate so much.
They do.
So you can choose which one.
So I would say, let's look at the family dynamic. I remember, even though it was going back over 2 decades ago, I can remember even when we had our first son, my whole mindset about parenting to me has always been one long teachable moment. And it started that was my attitude and my philosophy from the moment that my first son was born, that every interaction that I was having with my son, I was being watched. Right? Number one, I was being watched. And it's the same thing with your employees. Mm-hmm. As a leader or a CEO, everything that you're doing, your employees are watching you.
Yeah. And
knowing that you're under that microscope all the time, for me as a parent, and I guess also as a leader, I wanted to make sure that that my children, really the most important thing to me as a parent for me, was that my children would always be able to look me in the eye with respect. Mm. And they would always see me as a person of integrity. And I feel the same way about my leadership. I want my employees to be able to always look at me with respect and see me as a person of integrity. I want my clients, my partners, anyone who entrusts me with their business or with their career, I want them to look at me as a person of integrity and with respect. And so, that is something that definitely kind of has always guided me as a parent. Mm-hmm. And also as a parent. And I guess, talking this through, it kind of applies to my leadership as well. We've raised our kids with the motto, to whom much is given, much is required. So my kids have grown up with a tremendous amount of gratitude and humility and respect, understanding that they have an obligation to be part of something bigger than themselves in this world. To respect other people, that their word is everything, because they have, they were born into not wealthy families, because we are not wealthy by any stretch of the imagination, financially, but they were born in the country of the United States with tremendous opportunities, everything from, access to healthcare, access to education, access to opportunity. They were born with a lot of really amazing things, and they were born with good health, and there's just a lot to be grateful for. And, they have parents who have invested a lot in them. And so we've raised them from the mantra of to whom much is given, much is required. And so that puts a lot of ownership on them in terms of what we expect from them as people. Nothing is a free ride. There are strings attached when you take from others. And so we've raised them with that philosophy. And I think it's the same thing with my employees. When we entrust employees with our vision, with our organization, with our dream, we're out there risking everything, putting our financial futures on the line, putting our reputations on the line. We need our employees to believe in us, but it's a two-way street. I will absolutely give 110% to my people. I'll give 100% to my clients. But in return, I expect a certain level of loyalty from my employees. Again, to whom much is given, much is required. So how do you create a culture where everybody understands the tremendous opportunities that they have, not only to grow the organization, but to grow themselves and to become someone where they can reach their own greatest potential? So I guess with both as a leader and both, as a parent, I think I do apply very similar philosophies, and that I will give 110% to everything. And I will always be able to show up as a person of integrity. But in return, that comes with some strings attached, that I'm expecting the same standard of you to show up that way for me as well.
So what I hear you saying is that first you lead out as a model for the type of things that you expect from your children, from your employees, mm-hmm. and that by you having that integrity, you're modeling that behavior and the beliefs and things and the values, and then that in turn is almost in a way how it's reciprocated, is mm-hmm. that because you are leading out and modeling that behavior, it becomes reciprocal. And so that was kind of one of my questions too, is like, how do you enlist or enroll your family into your family culture? It's not, you don't want to slam down all these rules and standards on them when they're going, I don't think so, mom and dad, or if they're teenagers or or even young kids. My little ones often try to test my limits and, push my buttons and things or whatever. And that's natural. That's what kids do. That's how they learn and grow. That's how they grow their independence and things like that.
And they're also looking at you to put in the boundaries, by the way. They're when they push, they're looking for you to say, that doesn't work. And this is why it doesn't work.
So that's a big part of how do you, so tell us more about how you enlist them or enroll your kids and your employees into the beliefs, the values that you have about what's important to your culture.
So, looking at the family, I can remember years ago, this is years and years ago, that we actually did the exercise of creating core values for our family. Respect, mm-hmm. honesty, health is a really important value. So my family, we live a very healthy lifestyle. We have a very strong spiritual center, in our family. That's really important to us. And so the value of health is something that we emphasized and reverted back to during the teenage years, especially with our older son, where we saw opportunities potentially for him to engage in risky behavior. Mm-hmm. And rather than saying, if you do this, you're going to be grounded, that doesn't mean anything to them, right? We always tied it back to health, right? About, and about goals. So if your goal is to get to college, if your goal is to achieve X, Y, and Z, how do your actions and the decisions you make align with that goal? We always kept them focused on the bigger picture of knowing that the decisions they make today could impact the long-term goal that they have, right? Especially in the high school years, Look, good kids make really bad decisions. It isn't just the bad kids that make the bad decisions. Good kids find themselves in really bad situations with horrible consequences because they make bad decisions, and in a split second, everything can change for them. Mm-hmm. And that's the risk, right? So how do you completely stay present and vigilant and keep them on that path, knowing that they're going to have to do some healthy experimentation because they're high schoolers and teenagers, and this is just what it is? How do you keep them focused on the goal and on the core values that you've developed for them? And so I think, I can remember going to a conference in New York, the World Congress Conference, and seeing an expert speaking on adolescent development. And I just remember thinking to myself, at age 13, it's game on. You think you can leave your kids home alone starting at 13, 14? that's actually when it really, like, that's when you put the pedal to the metal, and you have to be 1,000% present between 13 and 18, 1,000% present. So I think in the family dynamic, you know, helping them really understand in those points of, critical decision making, reminding them what you stand for, who are you, who really do you want to be, and does that decision align with who you want to be, and letting them know that it only takes one really, really stupid decision to derail a lifetime of work towards a goal.
Yeah.
And staying really vigilant with that.
Yeah. So you reinforce that vision often of what you think, because I think, it's we as the leaders in the home, we have to keep that vision present to our family, because they can't, our kids can't see into the future. They don't understand all of the details of how things are laid out. But if we lead out in helping to reinforce that vision, then that can help to keep them on the path. Do you ever hold like family meetings or anything like that to try?
Not anymore. Our older son is, he's in college. He's a junior at Virginia Tech. But we are in constant contact and communication, as you were seeing prior to this podcast. Prior to this podcast, we're texting. We have a family group chat on the text, and we're in constant communication as a family collectively. And then, I have very special relationships individually with our kids. My husband does. And then our children have a very special relationship. And we definitely cultivated that because we made that a priority in our family. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work to grow a company. It takes a lot of work to grow a community. And it takes a lot of work to grow a family.
So what are the things that you did to cultivate that open communication? I mean, I think that kids maybe kind of go through a transition around in the teenage years, like you're saying, where it's they're experimenting their boundaries and their independence, and then they lose that communication with their parents. So what were some of the things that you did to maintain that open communication?
So it does start from the very beginning. You can't decide that when your kid is 12, you want to have an open line of communication with them when they become a teenager. Yeah. It starts literally from the time that they could speak, right? You are just constantly talking with them. I see so many families today with, they're out to dinner or they're out to lunch with their kids, and their kids are on the phone or they're on the iPad or whatever, right? Get them off of that and engage. Really communicate with them. Don't have them just sucked into the screen. I'm so glad that, those things weren't really prevalent when we were raising our kids when they were little. We really didn't have to fight that when, our kids were like 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, having to compete with the screen. So I would say from the very, very early days, just engage with them all the time. Talk with them as much as you possibly can. And it starts early, and let them know. I would say that's such a great question, because there are a couple things. In addition to the words, I love you, which we say constantly all day long, every day in our family, both on text, to each other. It's just constant. The words, I believe in you, are just as important. Mm-hmm. And it's something that we have just always told our kids. I say it to my son probably every day in some regard. I believe in you. If he's going through something difficult, we're there for him, but I believe in you. I believe in you is such a powerful statement. So letting them know that. And then the other thing, which is really important as kids go into the middle years, they will hear our voice in times of difficulty and times where they're in critical decision points and we're not with them. They will hear our voice over everybody else's. Okay. So keep talking to them. Even if you think you sound like a broken record, they do hear us at the most important times. And let them know that you are a safe place. And what that means is we never punished our kids. I will tell you that right now. My kids, not once, and not that they didn't misbehave, they never went into a timeout unless it was to give them a break. Mm-hmm. Never as a punitive action, never as a discipline, because I felt that using a separation from like their anchor. I mean, we're their anchors. The parents are the anchors, right? Saying to them, if you don't behave, I'm going to separate you from me. I mean, that must shake them to their core if I'm a 5-year-old, right? The one thing in the world that they can depend on is that their parent is going to be there. And then you use that as power over them to try and get them to behave. I mean, I think for me personally, it borderlines on abuse. Like, you don't use your presence in their life as a way to punish them, right? Now,
right.
if they need just time to, some quiet time just to kind of like relax, to offer them and say, look, do you need some time by yourself? Maybe you want to go and take a time out by yourself just to calm down, instead of using it as a punishment. We never punished our kids. Our kids never got grounded. I can tell you that our kids never snuck out, because we developed such a mode of trust in our relationships with our kids that they didn't want to violate that. They knew that they gained our trust, and they knew that if they snuck out, they knew we would find out about it, because we just would. And it would just ruin all the trust that we had built up all over those years. So in order to build that type of trust, it's a two-way trust. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you that with my older son, especially, who went out a lot, and he had a lot of friends in high school my younger son is a runner. He runs cross country, track, and that's really his peer group. And they don't really go out, the way that my older son went out with his friends. My phone number, my cell phone, was on the speed dial of a lot of my son's friends, because they didn't feel comfortable going to their parents. The only thing that I cared about when my older son was in high school was that my kid walked in the door alive, and his friends. That's it. Like, that's what I cared about. Get home safe. I'm not going to punish you. I'm not going to judge you. If you need us to pick you up at 3 a.m, we will get you. No questions asked. I just need you to be safe. Right. Yes. And so in order for them to really get that, they have to trust that you're not going to punish, right? That you're not going to betray their confidence, like when they tell you things. And this is kind of controversial, with some parents, but, we have an agreement with our kids that tell us everything. Tell us everything. Tell us who is doing what, because we want to be aware. We're not going to violate your trust unless we feel someone is crossing the line where they're endangering themselves. Right. And they told us a lot. We knew exactly which kids were doing what. And that allowed us to kind of keep our eye on the kids that were also close to our son, because they trusted us. And if at any time we felt that a child was in danger, we had insight and access into what they were doing, and we could have made that call. But I had a lot of kids in high school show up here when they didn't feel comfortable going home. All I cared about is that they were safe.
Wow. So
it's establishing that trust, and it starts from the very, very beginning, and letting them know that unconditionally, you are on their side and in their corner. Unconditionally.
Yeah. Well, and this goes back to what you said right in the beginning, that you felt like becoming a parent was one long teaching moment. And if you close off those communication lines, then you're not going to be there. They're not going to come to you for teaching, for learning, to be able to understand and educate about what's going on. You won't be able to coach them through those situations. Right. And a lot of from my study and my experience, is that a lot of times when parents punish, it's more coming from their own insecurity, feeling comfortable with what our kid has done. And so we feel like, oh, this is going to hurt me because of this looks bad, or because, whatever reason it is. Yeah. That if you stop and you look at your child and you try to understand, why did they do that? Or what are they going through? And how are they going to perceive me if I don't calm down and talk this through with them? And how will that affect our relationship? Because a lot of times when you pause and reflect, why is this making me upset? Or why do I feel like they need to be punished? And then you can approach it more of a present from a present mindset to be able to talk it through and figure out what they need to learn from this situation. And I love what you said too about always saying, I believe in you. I believe in you. Because, I remember an experience when I was in high school, and I always had a good relationship with my parents. And my mom was like on the band boosters or something like that. And she was there at school. And some friends of mine were like asking if I could go hang out with them. And I was like, hey, Mom, can I do this thing? And she goes, it's your life. And as soon as she said, I was like, whoo, like my mind exploded, like, oh, you're right. And it just, I don't know why it didn't occur to me before that, but it just, her expressing belief in me really put the weight back on me to say, I am responsible for the consequences of my life. And her expressing that belief in me helped me to bear the weight of that in a mature way, going, you're right. And she trusts me. And that was super empowering to do that.
Yeah. And that's so great that she did that. I've never viewed parenting like as a power struggle, like, and that what you just shared reminded me of something. I'm all about never being a victim and owning your outcome. Right. And that is how we've raised our kids. Like, as it gets back to what I said, to whom much is given, much is required. Right. So our kids have been given tremendous opportunity, and potential is the most wasted asset in the world. It doesn't matter how much potential you have. It matters how much you apply it, right? It doesn't matter if you're the smartest in the room if you do nothing with that. So we really wanted to, make sure that our kids knew that you have tremendous opportunity at you. You have natural skills, natural abilities, natural intellect. You come from a family who can support you financially, to be able to pursue your dreams. The rest is up to you. And I always say this to my kids, I used to, when they were younger, I will never wish for something for you more than you will ever want it. I never want to care more for a dream for you than you want it. If it's not important to you, I'm not going to invest in it. Period. Like, I can invest in my own dreams. You need to want an outcome more than I want it. But if you want it, I am going to back you completely. You have my unlimited support. If you want to pursue a dream, I'm behind you. I will do whatever I can to help you get there, but I will never want it more than you do. The minute that the apathy sets in and you're not interested in pursuing that again, I'm out. Right? So, really own your outcome. That was something that I really, really hammered into the heads of my children, that they had to understand that they alone at the end of the day are responsible. And that comes with the decisions that they make. That was a really big deal. And that came through. I mean, my kids are extremely goal driven. We never really punished for grades. Like if they didn't get a great grade, we did dig to the bottom of it. Like, if something was going on, we got the support that they needed, right? If there was a teacher that my son didn't gel with, and that happens all the time, I always believed that he had the capacity to do it. And if it mattered to him, if he would come to us and say, I need help, we went and got him the help, right? But we always have supported our kids, what they want, with what they want to achieve. And with school, I just felt that if a child brings home a bad grade, and it happens to everybody, they're already feeling badly enough about themselves. I don't want to add to that. Like, they're already punishing themselves in their mind. I want them to know, I'm on your side. What can we learn from this? How can we turn this around? This is where we are. Let's unpack it and figure out how we got here so that we don't get here again, right? But I never really understood the logic of a parent that punished a kid who brought home a bad grade.
Right.
It's just, there's a disconnect between what that outcome was and then what the consequence is. So it's at times like that our children really need us to be on their side, to help come up with solutions rather than, punitive consequences. And I'm not saying there aren't reasons for kids to be punished. I mean, both of our kids, when they got their driver's license, they signed a pretty stringent contract that I wrote, that we read before, and we had a lot of zero strike rules. Zero strike.
Yeah.
Period. Like, there were things that if they were done, you lose your license. And they knew that I was serious about it, because I said to them, I've already been driving you around for 15 years. If I do it one more year, it's not really an inconvenience to me, but it's going to be a real inconvenience to you. Mm-hmm. So I'm up for taking your license away if you can't understand the seriousness of you being on the road. I won't have it on my shoulders that you're endangering someone else. I won't live with that. So I will rescind your license. And they knew I was serious. Mm-hmm. And I think, parents need to be willing, if you're going to give a threat, right, and you're going to put a consequence out there, you better be ready to live with that consequence and follow through on it, mm-hmm. even if it's going to inconvenience you, or don't threaten them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and a lot of what you said, like about the grades and like the punishments and things like that, a lot of things already have natural consequences. Like you said, they already feel bad about their grades, meaning that they know that it's going to impact their academic standing and things like that.
Yeah.
Why pile on also anger and upset from the parents when this, like you said, you can turn it into a teachable moment to find, unpack it and figure out the solution for this. And then, it's true too, that there are some things that I think, like you said earlier, when I was said that my little ones push the boundaries, that we have to also be willing to set those boundaries. Mm-hmm. And some things absolutely need boundaries, like the license and moral things, or, things like that whatever your personal family values are, that you need to have those boundaries. So my other question for you though is, you talked about how your kids are so goal oriented, mm-hmm. and you uphold that vision. So what did you do to teach them about the vision, to try and instill in them the importance of a future outcome that their behavior would impact today?
Well, I do think that some of it was natural, that they are goal driven. My younger son, who's 18 now, has ADD. So, we managed that. I mean, all through his entire educational years, and we made sure that we taught him how to advocate for himself. Mm-hmm. He is an amazing advocate for himself. And even more important, and we could do a whole show on how to raise ADD kids, which I would love to do. He's never taken a drop of medication, even though when he was younger, I was vigorously encouraged to have him on all sorts of medication. I mean, I have a file that's 30 pages long that was told to medicate him for anxiety, OCD, ADD. I mean, he'd be a walking, pharmaceutical agent if I had him on meds that were recommended, and I refused. So it wasn't the route that we wanted to take. And now he's 18, and you know what? He's thriving. Everything kind of untangled, and he is an amazing self-advocate, and we knew what our rights were within the school system to make sure that he had accommodations that he needed, like extra test time, or, sitting a certain place in the classroom. But more importantly than that is, from the very beginning, we made sure that he understood that ADD and ADHD is simply, and I was diagnosed with ADD when I was a little girl, and my mom was told to put me on Ritalin, and she said no. And so I've never taken a drop of medication for ADHD, and I seem to turn out okay, right? So it was, most importantly for him, it was instilling in him the understanding that ADHD is just a different way of processing.
Yeah.
That the word disease or, disorder, or deficit, those are labels, and they have nothing to do with what his potential and capability is. And this is why, for a parent, they must unconditionally believe in their child. They must unconditionally believe in them. And if they don't believe in them, then that's something that is being perpetuated by fear, that they're afraid that their child won't launch, or they're afraid their child won't be happy, or they're afraid their child will fail in school, or they're afraid that their child won't make friends. And I get all that, right? But we have to push that aside. And our most important job as parents, especially for children who have ADHD or, another type of processing difference, we have to believe without a shadow of a doubt that our children will rise to their potential and that our children will be extraordinary and that they have tremendous capability. And when we believe that and we see that in our children, they can start to see it in themselves. And so that would be the most important advice that I would give to any parent who has a child with ADD or ADHD or another type of processing. And we went through a lot of different occupational therapy, and we did auditory processing therapy. And, I educated myself on what had to be done. Mm-hmm. But we believed in him, and we made sure that he knew that no test defined him, no teacher's opinion defined him, no one else's opinion defined him, that the single most important opinion that he held was the opinion that he held of himself. And so that helped him to be very goal-oriented. And he's just always believed in himself. And my older son, just from the very beginning, the day he was born, it was like all the stars were aligned, and he's goal driven and, intellectually gifted and athletically gifted. But that's a whole nother challenge, to parent that. And we had to make sure that he stayed stimulated and finding the right schools for him and making sure he had what he needed to stay on the right track. So every family has different parenting challenges with their kids. No kids come with a manual. But I would say that the single most important thing to create, to raise goal-driven kids is to let them know that you believe in them and to get behind them in what they want to achieve and not try to fit them into this cookie cutter box. My kids are so different, and I celebrate and appreciate and acknowledge their differences. One should not be like the other, right?
Right.
So help them tap into what their passions are and help them follow those.
That's definitely, then they start to cultivate what can I become? What is my vision? What is my capacity?
Yeah.
Totally.
And what are they excited about?
Yeah. Well, and I think another important point to bring up is that, you talked about fear, that if you're making fear-based choices, then you end up self-fulfilling prophecy about those things that you're afraid of a lot of times. And so, but the way that you described the way that you were empowering your kids is that it was really more of rather than fear, it was more like a faith in the sense of I'm going to work towards the goal rather than I'm trying to run away from something I'm afraid of. And so that's a really big deal to encourage and support the potential and work towards that as a goal rather than, I'm afraid of what could happen. And then you end up losing sight of that goal and that potential. So that's
I mean, don't ever tell anyone that they can't accomplish a dream. Definitely not your children.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Awesome. So another thing that you mentioned earlier was how, your relationship does not just start from the time that they're adults. You can't start this communication. That legacy that you're trying to create from the time that they're young begins in the day-to-day activity of raising your children. So I want to go into just briefly about what exactly defines a legacy and what does that mean to you?
I love that question. Getting back to what you said about it starts when they're younger. I can remember when I was building my first company and my kids, we struggled with all the driving everywhere, right? Like the taekwondo after school and the orthodontist and all of that. And I did try briefly. We actually hired an au pair, and I think she lasted maybe a week. And so we hired this au pair, and she goes to pick up my younger son from taekwondo after school. And what I remember about picking him up from after school is, and he, wouldn't even remember this, but he was literally, this is my 18-year-old, the one who has ADHD. He was literally Dennis the Menace when he was younger. I am not kidding. My son was the walking Dennis the Menace. With a little bit of Curious George mixed in there. Okay. And I can remember him tearing down the hallway at the taekwondo place. And when he heard that my name was called, Jordan Levin, your mom is here to come pick you up. And he would hear that and he would tear down the hallway. And the vantage point was that I could see him coming, right? Mm-hmm. And he was running with so much determination. And the minute he would turn the corner, he would go, "Mommy, guess what happened?" And that's what he would say. And you know what? That's what I didn't want to give up.
Yeah.
Like, that's why I got rid of the nanny, the au pair, and picked him up, because I couldn't get that secondhand from her.
No way.
I wanted to hear that. I wanted to see that face. Mommy, guess what happened? There was no way that I was going to give that up. And the same thing when my older son got braces, and, he was getting his braces off, and the orthodontist wasn't near our house. And he was like 15, and another woman, business owner who, at the time, she owns a transportation company. And she said to me, Marissa, just get a driver. Have someone drive him back and forth. That's not a good use of your time to be driving him up and down 66, and, just have a driver take him. And I never did it because, God, that car time was so important. And even when he got his braces off, I remember being at lunch, and he said to me, you know what, I'm not going to miss the orthodontist, but I'm really going to miss our car time. Because it was 30 minutes each way. And it was, the magic with parenting happens in the spaces in between. It doesn't just happen on the field. It doesn't just happen at an organized dinner. It happens in the spaces in between. And I wasn't willing to give that up. And my legacy, when you talk about legacy, I've built multiple businesses. I have a best-selling book out there. I'm a national keynote speaker. I'm a national columnist for Inc. magazine. All of that stuff is great. But if I haven't raised two sons that respect women, right, that honor and respect women, that live from a place of compassion to be part of something bigger than themselves, if I haven't done that, I have failed everything else. And my older son this past summer did a 4,500-mile bike ride across the country to raise money for special needs. Wow. 14 states, 11 weeks, close to 4,500 miles, pushing himself to the limit to visit with 40 different special needs communities, and giving back to others. And that, his desire to do that makes me prouder than anything else that he's accomplished. And my younger son is the same way, the same type of heart. So that is my legacy.
Yeah. And I 100%, it is in those times when you get to share your quality times together. And I can think of so many times in my life too, where it's that time in the car driving with my parents, like when I had my permit and I would drive with my dad, for hours and hours. So important. And those are the things that your kids are going to remember. And because they're not going to remember all the time you spent in the office, or the time you spent in or they're not going to appreciate it.
Yeah.
And it's not going to represent, what you've meant to them.
Yeah.
So it definitely starts from their whole lives. So I love that. Legacy is so important. And that's ultimately the goal. We want to be intentional so that in those moments we become aware of them, we're present to them, and we are intentional about making that culture and those values and the vision reinforced on a regular basis, reinforce that daily.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome, Marissa. Thank you so much. I loved all of your thoughts. This was amazing. Thank you so much. Do you have one final thoughts or word of advice to our audience about creating their family culture?
I think it gets back to the first thing that we opened with, and that's being intentional. Mm-hmm. And to, just to know that, our kids, those first 18 years, as someone who's now on the other side of it, it goes really fast. Mm-hmm. And that needs to be for me, even as a business owner, that was my priority, just being aware that, from the minute they're born, like, time is ticking, the clock is ticking. And how can you be the most conscious, present parent? I'm not just saying that because it's like the buzzword of the day, right? My kids are 18 and 21. It's just the way I've kind of always shown up as a mom, but it goes really fast. And you can't decide when they're 13 or 14 that you want to develop this close relationship with them and you want to gain their trust. It starts when they're little. Mm-hmm. It really does. And every message that you're telling them, even from the very beginning, matters. Everything matters. They remember all of it. They're very, very impressionable. So choose your words wisely, know what lessons you want to impart in them, and start from the beginning, because it all matters. And I would say put the screen down, engage with them.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Marissa.
My pleasure.
How can we connect with you and find you if we want to connect with you?
I'm on LinkedIn, so you can find me on LinkedIn, Marissa Levin, and you can visit Successful Culture International on Facebook and Twitter. I'm at Marissa Levin. So if you Google my name, I'm kind of everywhere. We'd love to have you subscribe to our leadership blog. I write for Inc. Follow me there. So, Google my name. I'm out there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Marissa.
Thank you for doing this podcast. It's really important.
Thank you for listening. I love getting your feedback. You can rate, and share on your favorite broadcasting medium or social media platform. Please do. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Pinterest at Family Culture Podcast and on Twitter @_Family Culture. Come check out my show notes and resources at homeandfamilyculture.com. Thanks again for listening. Mother Teresa once said, "If you want to change the world, go home and love your family."